Okay, folks, welcome back. This teaching is going to be specifically dealing with considerations in risk management. This module hopefully will be a little bit more of a sober reminder about how we should be looking at risk and how we can manage risk to survive and have longevity in our trading.
All right, maybe you had this in mind when you first got into trading. After all, the guy that sat down with you before told you, hey, this method's so good, you risk 10% of your equity. It's going to make you money. Okay, if you have equity balance of $10,000, you're going to risk 10%. Now, the first loss you assume, guess what you just took? A $1,000 loss. Okay, the system says continue risking 10%. So what do? You get in and you take the next trade. Bang, you hit with a $900 loss. Your equity now sits at $8,100. Three losses. You hit with another $810 loss. Bang. Your account's now at $7,290. This goes on for what could easily be seen in anyone's trading, eight string loss. Eight string loss. That is absolutely realistic, guys. I don't care how good a trader you are, you're going to get this upside your head one day, and you need to be prepared for it. If you're going to risk 10% of your equity simply because you think you're going to be hitting it on the next trade and you've been in drawdown, there's a psychological impact that traders go through, and we more or less deny um, the technicals that may be indicating that we're in a trade that's not going to pan out. But we won't let go of it. We start arm wrestling with the market because, hey, we're going to be right, and it's going to feel so good when we are, and we can give the middle finger, not to be crude to the screen, cuss at the screen, say I got you, I got my money back. Everybody wants to have that, that feeling of conquering the market and beating the guy that took the money from you last time. Everybody wants to go into the end zone, slam the football down, and do their victory dance and all that. But that doesn't work in this business, and they'll hand you your head on a platter. If you give them the opportunity to take your money, and a lot of it, they're going to be more than happy to take it from you. If you just take an 8 loss streak here in your equity of $10,000, your account draws down $5,217. That's 52%. 52%, folks. Do you think you can take 8 trades in a single week? The way some of you guys on these forums trade, this could happen in a day. Now, I'm not saying that most of you guys that are risking 10%, but there are some neophytes that come into this business and think they're going to be able to do it. And I'm sorry, but maybe you'll come off the gate, make a couple wins, and think, man, I'm risking 10%, and look, it's really working out well. But man, I'm telling you, that cycle leads to destruction. All right, just 8 trades. Look at this. If you have 8 losses, you're crushed. That's a huge drawdown. Not to mention the emotional impact and your mental equity, because not only are we trading with real tangible money currency in our account, that equity base is not limited just to the dollar terms. You have an equity amount of money in your mind, what you're really willing to absorb and risk. You may have put $10,000 on an account, but man, you don't really want to be losing 4,000 of it. So what are you really trading with? $4,000. That's your mental capital. So we're going to talk more about that when we get into uh, wealth building, money management. But for now, understand that risking 10% absolutely should be no-brainer for you. You don't do that. Okay, maybe you're so uh, turned off by 10%, but hey, you're not too afraid of taking risks. So 5% per trade is, it's doable for you. $10,000 starting account. Okay, first loss, bang, $500 loss. Now your account drops down to $9,500. You do this for a couple series of losses. At the fifth loss, okay, now your account's down to $7,737. But hey, you're going to make it back, and you're not going to bend 5% risk on every trade. Well, with the standard typical 8 string loss that can happen to anybody. I'm not saying you're going to have this once a month. I'm not saying you're going to have it 3 times a year, but it's going to happen eventually. If you are in this business at any length of time, you will suffer a 8 loss string. It's going to happen. If you had the risk of 5% per trade, starting with an equity balance of $10,000, your equity would draw down to the tune of $3,016 or 30% drawdown. Can you withstand that? Can you imagine taking 8 trades in a single week and being drawn down 30%? Let me tell you something. I have done that. I have done that, okay, and it is absolutely demoralizing because if you come out the gate strong, thinking, "Yeah, man, I'm gonna tear it up." Well, yeah, you're gonna tear it up, all right. You're gonna tear up your account, okay, and you're gonna sit there and you're gonna be depressed for the entire weekend. You're gonna mow over possibly adding more money when that's not the answer. The answer is controlling the amount of money that you put up, and controlling yourself is very difficult when you're in a period of drawdown if you're a new trader. I'm talking from experience, okay? When I got involved with commodities, I was trading, 5 and 6, 7 contracts of Chicago Board Trade wheat, and really my balance really should have been working with one mid-am contract. And I'm not going to go into contracts and specifications for commodities, but I'm just saying that I was over leveraging. And the worst part of it, I knew I was over leveraging. And when I was losing, it didn't hurt enough. I was going to be right. I was imposing my will in the market. And I'm telling you, you will lose doing that. It will hurt you doing that. You don't gain anything from that except for misery and depression. Trust me, I know. Okay? So 5% risk is absolutely too much. It's insane. Don't do it. All right, now let's look at the typical trader's thought going in. This is the standard mentality of all traders. If you read it on all the forums, all the books, we all say it, and I preach it too. Don't risk any more than 2% per trade. All right. Okay, we're going to look at trader 1 up here at the top. Okay, you have one trader starting with an equity balance of $10,000, and he's going to risk 2% per trade. And he runs into the inevitable 8-string loss. It's going to happen. Well, the account draws down after 8 losses $1,318. Total percentage drawdown 13%. You could probably withstand that. I mean, most traders could absorb that. Certainly new traders, because they're invincible, and they're eventually going to be in the next streak where they make 100% accuracy. So this is absolutely within the realm of comfort for most people. If they have a $10,000 equity balance and they only draw down $1,300, most people can absorb that. But let's flip the script for a moment. Look at trader 2. Okay, he starts with $10,000 too, and he's starting with 2% risk. Watch what happens. His first loss at 2% is $200. Suddenly, he has a problem. He has absorbed a loss. Something's going to take place in this trader's mind that didn't take place in the first trader's mind. So his next trade, he only loses $98, but it's still a loss. So the next trade he takes is what? A loss of $48. Look at just after 3 losses, the difference in terms of equity. Where are we at? Essentially in the same neighborhood. But look what happens over the period of the 8 losses. Trader 2, after 8-string loss, his account draws down $538. Total percentage drawdown 5%. Do you see a difference there? What do you think trader 2 did differently that trader 1 didn't do? Number 1, he identified the fact that he is not perfect. He identified, or she rather, in deference to the ladies that are watching this, sorry gals. The second trader here in our case study, when he absorbs a loss, okay, it only takes one to do this. The first loss, immediately he cuts his risk in half. So no longer is he risking 2%. So now he has to draw down to $200. So he risks on the next trade, when his account equity is at $9,800, he's going to risk 1% per trade. Now, he assumes another loss. Does he stay at 1%? Absolutely not. What does he do? He drops down to 1/2 of 1%. So his next trade, he has a loss, $48.51. Guys, you can take that. If you got $9,700 in your account and you can lose $48, you can lose $50. You're not losing sleep over that. If you lose sleep over that type of loss with the equity balance of $9,700, stop trading. It's not for you. Go bet at the horse races. Play lottery, something like that. But I'm telling you, you have to assume some kind of risk. This goes along with everything that's been discussed at the beginning of the disclaimers. I mean, you have to understand you're going to lose money in this business, and if you're not comfortable with losing money on a consistent basis where you're not perfect, bottom line is stop trading. Okay, I have losses. You're going to have losses too. I can't teach you how to trade perfectly without losses. No one can. You're not going to be able to find it. And if that's the grail you're looking for, it doesn't exist. Trust me, it doesn't exist, because I'd pay everything I have for it and it's not there. Trust me. So let's keep this train rolling here. Okay, after he drops his equity risk to 1/2 of 1%, okay, and he has another loss, the fourth loss, okay, $48.27. Well, he takes another loss. He stays at 1/2 of 1%. Look what happens at the end of his 8 losses. He's got a huge amount of his starting equity still at his disposal, and he suffered 8 losses. He hasn't had one winning trade yet. Now contrast that with Trader 1. This guy, he's down $1,300. Trader 2, he's only down $538. The 5% drawdown is absolutely tolerable in any one trading. I mean, you're gonna suffer 5%. Good grief, 5%. That's what you're trying to make in a day. Some of you guys that are trading, you have to control your risk. Okay, if you have a loss, cut your risk. If you have another loss, cut your risk. Trade and drop down to 1/2 of 1%. Now, if you have 5 or 6 trades, then you've lost at 1/2 of 1%. Drop it down to 1/4%. Okay, whatever suits your risk appetite, that's what you have to do. But you have to go the other way. You do not average down. In other words, you don't take, well, I lost 2%, let me risk 4 now, because if all it takes is one trade and I'll make that back and maybe even make the 2% I was hoping to make on the previous trade that lost, or I only have to make half of what I lost in terms of pips on the last trade if I risk 4%. Don't do that, guys. I've done it. I'm telling you, I've done it. Granted, I'll give you this, and I'm going to be fair. There's been times where early on I did it and it worked out in my favor, but when I tried it later on, it crushed me and it never gave it back to me. It took more and it took more and it took more, and I'm telling you, it is a loser's game. Trust me, I know this by firsthand experience. It never pans out over time. Doesn't happen. Okay, so just don't do it. If you have a loss, cut your risk. Cut your risk. Cut your risk. All right. Now let's stretch this out a little bit. All right. Trader 1 had a drawdown of $1,300, okay, on 8 losses. Not one trade was a winner, all 8 were losers. Well, look at Trader 2. Let's assume for a moment the guy hits into, he's got a bad run. He's got some problems in his personal life. The 9 to 5 is getting him, stressed out. His boss is driving him crazy. He's rushing trades. He's not following the system. He's not feeling well. He's spending too much time in the forums and not really studying the charts. It's something that's keeping him from being disciplined. Okay, he's not hitting on all cylinders. Something's wrong. Maybe he's got a system that doesn't work. Maybe he hasn't abandoned his bad habits. Bottom line is he's not made a profitable trade yet. Look what Trader 2 can absorb. He can absorb 3 times the amount of loss that Trader 1 can, following the same approach. The first loss, risking 2%, he only draws down to $9,800. Second loss, risking 1% now, because he's trimmed back to his risk, he only loses $98. His drawdown goes to $9,700 in his account. Now he's at 1/2 of 1%, and he stays there, okay, all the way through up to 24 losses. This gentleman or young lady could have a loss string of 24 losses and still be less than the first trader. Think about that. This guy or gal can have 24 losing trades and still have lost less than the first trader on 8 trades because he didn't augment his risk exposure. You have to control the amount of risk in your account. If you do not do this, no one's doing it for you. I can't do it for you. Your wife can't do it for you. Your husband can't do it for you. Your kids can't do it. A broker certainly ain't going to do it. Okay, so you have to have this in your plan. It has to be mounted on the wall, tattooed on your hand. It's got to be on your forehead, so when you see yourself in the mirror, you see this all the time. Control risk. I can't stress it enough. Nobody talks about it enough, and you have to do this. You absolutely have to do this. Okay, this will give you the Viagra effect, not to be crude, but it gives you the staying power. You have to be able to absorb losses. Because I'm telling you, these banks, they're ruthless. As good as my methods are, I still get slapped around sometimes. Okay, it's going to happen. Now, granted, when we drop down to 0.5%, okay, we're not probably going to make a whole lot of money coming back out of it. Sure, that's fine. But there's a strategy that we're implying that goes a long way in terms of a profitable career. Okay, if you can absorb 24 losses and only have 12% drawdown, you're controlling risk. There's not a trader out there, okay, that can beat their chest and say, I've been trading for 5, 8, 10 years, okay, and I've never had an 8-string loss. Okay, I'm telling you, they don't, that's a unicorn. They don't exist. Okay, so you're going to have strings of losses. I'm showing you how, even with, and I've never had 24 losses. I'll give you that. I've never had a string of 24 losses, but I've given you a shield. Okay, I've given you a mindset. When you step out of that arena and risk your capital and you risk your money, this is your only defense. This right here. Okay, it's not the trade signals. Okay, it's not the amount of money you put in the account to start with. It's the amount of money you put up. Because whatever you offer them in your hand, open palmed, they're going to take it if they can. So if you give them a large percentage of it, all you're doing is enticing more interest in taking it from you. Okay? So the moral of the story is, if you have a loss, cut your risk. If you have a loss again, you cut your risk and you drop down to 0.5%. Okay? And you stay there until we have a turn in equity. And when you start making money again, start being profitable, okay, there's a way to going back to the original risk exposure. Say your maximum risk exposure is 2% per trade. Okay, how do we compensate for that? How do we get back to that point? Well, let's talk about that now. How do we go forward with this information? Okay, well, when we experience a loss, the first thing you want to do is, number one, reduce risk. That's the absolute first thing you think in your mind. Not, let me get back in and try to get my money back. No, you cut risk. Why? Because you already have a state of mind where you feel you're victimized. Okay, I don't care how long you've been trading, losses still have an impact. Okay, I don't like losing. I hate losing. Okay, because my method wins more than it loses. When it happens, I don't like it. Okay, but I don't beat myself up about it and go in and say, well, I lost $500. I'm going to get in there and trade, and I'm going to try to, make $2,000 on the next trade because I lost five. I want to get 4 times as much money back, and I want to do it in half the time. I don't think like that anymore. I did. I'm going to give you this. I did think like that years ago, but I don't need to do that anymore. Okay? And you don't need to do that now. If you haven't adopted that bad habit, this is hopefully keep you from doing it. So, if you take a loss at 2%, the next trade you will only assume 1% risk. Now, should this trade result in a loss, the next trade will only assume 1/2 of 1%. Okay? You will only risk 1/2 of 1% per trade until you have made at least 50% of the drawdown of the equity dip from the trade risking 1% of equity. Okay, so in other words, the trade that you lost when you were risking 1%, whatever that amount is, let's say it's $500, you need to make $250 risking 1/2 of 1% before you can trade up to the 1% risk per trade tier. Okay, now you're going to risk 1% per trade until you make at least 50% of the equity dip that you used when you risked 2% per trade. Okay, so again, if you were risking $500 when you were risking 2%, at 1% risk, you need to make at least $250 before you go back to risking 2%. If you lose, you go back to that system again. You drop, cut it in half, cut it in half, cut it in half. And now you have an opportunity to step back and say, okay, I can take some blows, I can get knocked around, but I'm not getting taken out of the game. Okay, so now hopefully, with this presentation, you can breathe. There's a way of doing it, guys, okay? And this is how it's done. You can't stay in this business without controlling your risk. That's the moral. Stick to the game plan, stick to the method of controlling risk using this approach, and I absolutely guarantee, okay, you want the Holy Grail? This is the Holy Grail. This is it. You have to have a shield in this business. If you don't, your money's going to come to me. It's going to go to the central banks. It's going to go to the guys that know how to do this, okay? Because I'm going to be in the game years from now, and I'm going to still apply this approach. When I have losses, this is how I do it. This is what kept me in the game as long as I have been. It's going to be a concept that I hold closest to me, because this is more important than my entry signals. This is more important than my exits. This is the absolute key and cornerstone to long-term success in careers in trading.